So we're going to look a little further at these three elements of the story: the characterization of the protagonist, the way the writer presents conflict, and the use of setting. So he was eating a sandwich hungry. He'd eaten nothing since morning. He'd been too excited to eat. This is important because it seems to contradict the situation itself. That he's in this fairly, well, harrowing, awful, unpleasant, dire situation, but is too experiencing a positive emotion. He's too excited to have any food, and I think this shows the effect of his fanaticism. And actually, that makes an element of his internal conflict. He's driven in one direction by his fanatical political and ideological beliefs, but then in another by the fact that he's a young guy and he's innocent. He finished the sandwich and, taking a flask of whiskey from his pocket, he took a short draught. And again, you can see here this behavior suggests that perhaps it's to keep him alive, to actually give him energy. If it is, it's not a very sensible way of getting it, or to numb himself from the horror. So there's a suggestion there of perhaps he's not feeling as positive about this experience as he seems to think he is. He paused for a moment, considering whether he should risk a smoke. It was dangerous. The flash might be seen in the darkness, and there were enemies watching. He decided to take the risk. So again, here is the suggestion that he's young and impulsive, and that conflict that is in conflict with his scenario. He is in conflict with the level of responsibility and the severe seriousness of the situation that he's in, on a rooftop with an enemy sniper facing him. Placed a cigarette between his lips, struck a match, and inhaled the smoke hurriedly and put out a light. Almost immediately, a bullet flattened itself against the parapet of the roof. Now, what you get the sense here is obviously the literal sense of conflict between two sides, but a sense of this isolated young individual in conflict with the entire surroundings. The fact that he can't, the fact that he can't tell exactly where this has come from. A bullet flattened itself against the parapet of the roof. We've got this suggestion here of it being in control, but it doesn't say, a gunshot fired across the street. It's focused only on the effect because that's all he can see and experience, rather than seeing someone shooting him and knowing where it's coming from. So there's a sense of claustrophobia about this, feeling of almost suffocatingly enclosed, that I think shows us that almost as if he is against the whole setting. So the setting and the external environment is completely in conflict with him. The sniper took another whiff and put out the cigarette. Then he swore softly and crawled away to the left. Cautiously, he raised himself and peered over the parapet. There was a flash and a bullet whizzed over his head, and he dropped immediately. And again, this is another example, I think, of this, the sense that he is completely being pinned down by this enemy sniper creates a sense of him being in complete conflict with his surroundings. He rolled over the roof to the chimney stack in the rear and slowly drew himself up behind it until his eyes were level with the top of the parapet. There was nothing to be seen, just a dim outline of the opposite housetop against the blue sky. So again, the setting gives us this sense of the place becoming anonymous or invisible. There was nothing to be seen. There's no features of life to see in this particular urban setting, which again becomes a conflict between what is normal and what is abnormal. If you look at an urban scene in a street in a city, you expect it to be filled with life, but here the unusual sense of conflict has made this place invisible. So it is against the conflict is in the setting, but between what is normal and abnormal in times of war, we've got an empty, invisible seat stream. And there's a rising tension begins here. As an armoured car comes across the bridge and advances slowly up the street. It stopped on the opposite side of the street 50 yards ahead. The sniper could hear the dull panting of the motor. Now this again, this personification of the tank's motor itself suggests, that the boundaries are being confused between machines and humans. Machines are like people in this description here. And that relates to the theme of boundary crossing in war, that things are not as they seem, and that morality is not what it seems, and that we should be prepared for clear distinctions between people and machines, between right and wrong, to be difficult to see clearly. They collapse in wartime. And then again, the grey monster, that metaphor, gives it this sense of inhumane brutality that is in conflict with the very human way that the protagonist is represented. The protagonist is shown to be young, he's shown to be vulnerable, he's shown to be excited, he's given all these qualities. And he is at odds with these inhumane monstrosities that are threatening to kill him. Then round the corner of a street came an old woman, her head covered by a tattered shawl. She began to talk to the man in the turret of the car. She was pointing to the roof where the sniper lay, an informer. And so here is an enormous sense of conflict between, again, what is ordinary life and what happens in war. Because we see this old lady, someone who is usually treated with respect and care by society, in wartime is seen as an informer and is seen as a traitor and is seen as, an enemy and treated as such. And that again comes back to this theme of there being no boundaries in wartime. The turret opened of the tank. A man's head and shoulders appeared looking toward the sniper. The sniper raised his rifle and fired. The head fell heavily on the turret wall. The woman darted toward the side street. The sniper fired again. The woman whirled round and fell with a shriek into the gutter. So here, in the end of this paragraph, there's that clear, brutal description of the sniper shooting this old lady because she is an enemy. And again, that represents the theme of there being no boundaries in war, and the conflict between ordinary morals and wartime morals, or the lack of wartime morals. The syntax and the sentence structure here, the order of the words and the length of the sentences, what you see in this particular passage, this short paragraph, a lot of short, what are called declarative sentences, sentences that assert something is going on. The sniper raised his rifle and fired. The head fell heavily on the turret wall. They're not questions, they're not exclamations, they're just straightforward assertions of fact. And I think they show us the sniper's loss of emotion, his inhumanity, and the way that this inhumanity that you see reflected in this style is in conflict with his youth and his personality. Suddenly from the opposite roof, a shot rang out and the sniper dropped his rifle with a curse. The rifle clattered to the roof. The sniper thought the noise would wake the dead. He stooped to pick the rifle up. He couldn't lift it. His forearm was dead. "I'm hit," he muttered. And again, there's a sort of lack of emotion that's shown in this very cold, clinical series of short declarative sentences that are the same when he's being attacked and when he's doing the attacking. He's cold and clinical here when he's being shot, but he's also cold and clinical when he shoots the old lady. So there's this sense here of the way that conflict itself removes the emotional life of individuals. That individuals become these sort of inhumane robots, just like the tanks themselves, the grey monster with its dull panting. There's a sense there of the boundaries between human and machine collapsing because of the effects of war.